Hello, continuing on. Um, I'm working on the foreground, and I want to mention after a comment from the video that I posted last week, and I was grateful for the comment. Someone mentioned that they loved the yellow on the grasses in the foreground, and I was looking at it and looking at the actual painting and realized that the photography has enhanced the yellow on there a fair amount. So it's more of a brassy ochre. I think I could describe it that way. Of course, that's kind of like picking out paint chips by name, but it's not quite as yellow as this. Nonetheless, it was that time of year when grasses were starting to change color and they were not green any longer. So this is part of the painting where I'm just trying to lay in the water, and I'm not sure why I was going so slow, but I'm using the brush kind of on the flat side and just dragging it across the board. The panels that I'm painting on and the prime that's on them is the Michael Harding prime. And although it is really unique in that you can just wipe the oil paint right off of it without leaving even a stain while it's still wet, it does have a nice drag to it, which is one of the reasons why it's become one of my favorite primes to use. So pulling the paint across flat, it pulls the paint off the brush nicely and leaves a nice amount of paint on there versus using the end of the brush to put it on. And you probably saw me using the best tool I have, my fingers, and I'm sure you guys have all used those quite a bit over your painting time. Sometimes the brush just isn't the right shape or seems like it wants to get in the way, so using a finger will do the trick. There's really just fine-tuning little things happening here, trying to get the edge of the grasses down in the foreground so I can show some dimension. I don't want to add too much, and I certainly don't want to add too much detail to it because, well, for one thing, in my sketch there just wasn't any, and I liked what that showed, that there wasn't a lot of information. So I'm going to try and keep this slightly larger painting the same way. I've done probably 4 or 5 more paintings since this demo, the same size, using sketches out of the gouache sketchbooks. And I can tell you that it's just, at least for me, a wonderful experience to work from something that was painted from life that has the qualities that kind of work has. So I'll sit down with my computer and start looking through photo references, and pretty soon need a cup of coffee because I'm starting to glaze over. And it's not out of boredom of what I'm looking at, but it's out of just this sheer lack of being able to see what's really going on in the photos. So I've just realized that working from the sketchbooks is closer to the experience of what it's like to paint outside, which to me is the most amazing experience there is as a painter. I haven't been out there much lately, and I hope to get out soon, but deadlines and weather and things have kept me inside. But I need to get back out and refresh and restore and let all the good things that happen when you're painting outside happen. Here you can see I'm using I think I'm actually using a filbert to lay in some of these breaks in the tree mass. Talked about that a little bit on the last segment. It's very important to make sure that those have air, have some soft edges. Many times I'll try to make sure that there is maybe one crisp edge where the light is really breaking against something hard. Could be a trunk, could be the edge of a building, could be just a really harder mass of foliage. And then the other 2 or 3 edges, or the rest of the shape, gets blown out or gets softer edged, or in this case is showing some of that light that's coming from behind, trying to fan through the leaf masses. And here I'm going back with the palette knife because I want something different than just a brush texture. So if I just keep using the brush, I get the same texture all over the place. And I think one of the things I like about painting landscape in particular is that there's so much variety in the texture of the land mass and the foliage. And one tool doesn't always cut it. And I'm not a fan of just taking one brush stroke and painting the entire painting with one brush stroke. I tend to like to try to keep my brush work or knife work or the way I put paint on related to the texture that I'm trying to represent. So if it's a spiky plant, I want to use something that gives me a spiky brush stroke. If it's hard sheet metal, then I'm going to use something that gives it the same textural appearance as the hard sheet metal. I don't want to just use a one stroke is good for everything kind of approach. And that's just, it's always been something that I've felt, and then when I read about some painters who described it in books, who've talked about it from that same point of view, it resonated with me. And so I keep pursuing it that way. Like, I don't know what that stroke was, but it was a value in there in the color. So I'll come back in and modify it. I think using the knife is really good for things, but depending on the surface, like I'm not a big fan of using the knife when it scratches through and you see the board showing. That drives me a little bonkers. So I may soften it once I put it in with a brush. I'll get it down and I'll see that show up and soften it. Well, looks like I'm about done because I'm trying to sign my name. The most difficult part of painting, excuse me, is doing that. Thanks for joining on this. I'll be producing another video soon, and I'm not sure if it'll be outside or inside. The weather's kind of goofy right now, but we'll see what happens. Be sure to write me if you have any questions, any comments. I'm happy to hear it all. Thanks again. I really appreciate you being a subscribed member to my site.